Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahavidyan karavavahai, tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarva Vide Namaha. Om. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to our many students attending this class regularly online. We continue our study of chapter 17. In our last class, the topic was nididhyasana, and that topic continues today. Let me when I was preparing for class, I had an insight, if we can call it that I think was something a bit new with regard to nididhyasana. Our definition of shravana and manana, it's not sitting right. Our definition of shravana and manana are quite straightforward, and that is shravana is listening to these teachings means engaging in a process of self-inquiry guided by these teachings. That's clear. And knowledge takes place as a result of shravana. Knowledge means self-discovery, discovery of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma. Manana is removing doubts. That's largely what this whole text is about. And then nididhyasana, sadly, gets often called assimilation. And I say sadly because that word assimilation is so vague and is used for so many other things. When you eat food, you assimilate it. So that's not a very appropriate kind of term to apply for nididhyasana. Of course, we translate it as Vedanta contemplation. What is the purpose of it? Commentators always use exactly the same words. It's for the removal of viparita bhavana, which is a feeling which is contrary to your true nature. And then they further define that viparita bhavana as dehatma buddhi. What's wrong with this? Okay. Dehatma buddhi is the habitual identification with your body and mind. That's very meaningful, because after you realize your true nature, that habit of your mind to continually, even though you have discovered through the process of self-inquiry that I am indeed sat-chit-ananda atma, the identification with body and mind doesn't instantly vanish. We've discussed this at length in prior classes. We said there's even a neurological basis for it, because we understand that our brains get wired according to our experiences. If you've lived your whole life experiencing your body and mind as you, don't you think that'll be wired into your brain pretty deeply? So that has to be removed. So this is a conventional way of understanding it, according to the commentaries. The insight I had, which is a little different, is suppose we just flip it around. So removal of dehatma buddhi is a negative expression. How would you express that positively? So the ego, the sense of I, is initially connected to body and mind. When that is removed through the practice of nididhyasana, what is the positive outcome? And we've discussed so many times, the positive outcome is certainly not the removal of the ego. This is one of the most common misconceptions. Ego is a thought, and it's a very helpful, functional thought. Otherwise, when somebody asks, who are you? You won't be able to answer. Well, how silly would that be? It's a thought, it's a functional thought, it's not the enemy. The problem, of course, is when the ego is identified with body and mind. That's the problem. So to flip it around into a positive sense, the ego, let me switch words. Identification, self-identification, your sense of who I am gets shifted from body-mind to sat-chit-ananda atma. And this we've discussed. But now I'm applying it specifically to nididhyasana. Nididhyasana could now be redefined. Instead of removal of dehatma buddhi, suppose we say nididhyasana is shifting your sense of self from dehatma, from the body and mind, to sat-chit-ananda atma. So look at this. And here's really the insight. You know, that part is actually pretty obvious. But I think here's a more subtle observation, maybe the more important observation. Shravana is self-discovery, culminates in self-discovery. And you discover that you have never been bound. That's very interesting. Atma has eternally been liberated, free. In fact, our text starts with that observation here today. There's no such thing as liberation for Atma. Okay. Atma doesn't come to class, so a body-mind comes to class, so that's the idea we understand. But here's the point I'd like to suggest. Nididhyasana, if we say that Shravana culminates in self-discovery, which is the removal of ignorance, we can say then that nididhyasana is for the sake, this is a strange statement, but this is what it struck me. Nididhyasana is for whose sake? It's for the sake of the ego. Right? It's shifting the ego from I am this little critter, shifting that to I am sat-chit-ananda atma, and that is where the fruits of enlightenment come, the phala, the benefits of enlightenment. When you just discover I am sat-chit-ananda atma, and then your ego clicks back into the old groove, I am this little critter, then how are you benefited by that discovery? Of course, next time you come to class, Swami says, you are sat-chit-ananda. Oh yeah! But what happened all week long is this identification with this little critter. So, nididhyasana is what permanently shifts that identification from being a little critter to being sat-chit-ananda atma, and then all week long, I am sat-chit-ananda atma, not only on Sunday mornings. So that's the so that's the purpose then of nididhyasana. And I thought that was such an interesting observation that I would share it to you first to introduce the series of verses which continues on this topic of nididhyasana. So we can proceed. Ahameva sadatmagnaha ahameva sadatmagnaha shunyastvanyaryatambaram shunyastvaivaryatambaram ityevam satyasandhatvat ityevam satyasandhatvat asaddhata na badhyate asaddhata na badhyate. So continuing nididhyasana, and a good tip-off is beginning with the word aham, the Sanskrit pronoun I. We've said that oftentimes texts on nididhyasana are written in the first person for the sake of contemplation. Aham eva, I indeed, sada atma-jnaha. Actually, two ways of taking it. Could be sat atma-jnaha, the knower of Atma, which is Sat, or I would prefer Sada Atma-jnaha, always Atma-jnaha. Seems to be more consistent with the flow of thought here. I am always Atma-jnaha. I am always a knower of Atma, which is a little abstract. I am always enlightened. Which I? Sat-chit-ananda. Remember, this is nididhyasana. It presumes you've already discovered, I am Sat-chit-ananda Atma. If you haven't discovered that, you shouldn't be doing nididhyasana. You can't meditate or contemplate on something that you don't know. When I say that, I still remember my guru's joke about this. He says, how can you meditate on gagabugai? He made up that word, you know. So makes the point. You can only contemplate on what you know. So, I am always enlightened is said from the standpoint of Atma. And I am then shunyaha, free from shunya. You have to break these words apart. Shunyaha tu anyaihi are the words broken apart. I am free too, but I am shunyaha, free from anyaihi, from everything else, from anything other. And I'm free from everything else, yatha ambaram, like space. So space fills this room. How is the space in this room affected by our presence inside? More than that, how is the space in this room affected by the walls? Oh, that brings a very different perspective. So whatever you experience doesn't simply said, whatever you experience doesn't affect space. Whatever you experience doesn't affect you as Sat-chit-ananda Atma. Look at those two parallel statements. Whatever you experience doesn't affect space. Whatever you experience doesn't affect I, the true I, Sat-chit-ananda Atma. Iti, thus, evam, based on this understanding, satyasandhatvat, when this, due to the ascertainment of this truth that I am unaffected by anything experienced like space, based on all that, asaddhata, the one who is freed from ignorance, na badhyate, is not bound. That interest, Shankara is very subtle in his use of words here. He says, if we said Atma is never bound, then how can he say na badhyate? He's not bound. Atma was never bound in the first place, so why would Shankara then say that he is not bound? He's referring to asaddhata, the one who's become freed from ignorance. Who is the one that becomes freed from ignorance? Careful now. Who has ignorance and who becomes free from ignorance? A very important teaching in Advaita Vedanta. Atma can't have ignorance. Atma is sada eternally enlightened. Besides the fact that Atma doesn't have a mind. So if it doesn't have a mind, how can Atma have ignorance? Ignorance belongs to the mind, and the mind belongs to whom? Whoever says, my mind, to that person has ignorance. And that person, na badhyate, becomes freed from ignorance and becomes freed from bondage. Atma does not become freed from bondage. You the individual becomes freed from bondage. All right. Kripanasthein yatai vato, kripanasthein yatai vato, vidur brahma param hiye, vidur brahma param hiye, virat yo nyan yadrik. I'm sorry? Swarat. Right? That's a da with a virama. Swarat. Swarat is with the ta and then becomes da due to sandhi rules. Swarat. It comes from swaraj. Raj means the ruler. Swaraj, the one who rules himself, the one who is utterly independent. All right. Swaradyon yad. Sorry. Swaradyon. Now you've confused me. Swaradyon yan yadrik swasthas. Swaradyon yan yadrik swasthas. Tasya devaha sanvashe. Tasya devaha sanvashe. Yeah, that may look a little bit like E, but you know, in Sanskrit, you can't have an A and an E next to each other like that. That's Hindi. This is not Hindi? Right, so, da. All right. Te kripanaha. They are miserable little critters. They are pitiful. Who are pitiful? Te, ye, in the second line, those who viduhu, those who understand param brahma, the absolute reality, as being anyata eva ataha, as being other than oneself. Though, I'll paraphrase, those are to be pitied who understand Brahman, the reality of all, to be other than oneself. And in context here, it's not so much param brahma. Well, here's the sense. If you look at the, just a little bit of an aside here, have you seen the pictures from that new space telescope, that James Webb telescope? I think 10 times more powerful than the Hubble Space Observatory, and it is showing the most mind-boggling visions of deep space. When you look at those pictures, how big do you feel? I mean, we are not just an infinitesimal speck, smaller than that. When you compare to the magnitude of the universe. So when you see those pictures, you have that sense of smallness, and that's what's referred to those who are kripanaha. Those are to be pitied, who have, by the way, I also have that sense of smallness when I look at those pictures, but that's in a very worldly sense. Here, in a more fundamental sense, those are to be pitied who see themselves to be this high, and I'm putting my own meaning here. Those are to be pitied who really and truly see themselves to be a little speck in a vast universe. That's my paraphrase of Shankara here. So, and naturally, if you identify with your body and mind, that's a fact. You are, this body and mind is not just a little speck, insignificant little speck. How do you count? No matter what you do in this lifetime, how does it affect that vast universe? this is the idea, not just a tiny little speck, but an insignificant little speck. This is a perspective when you're identified with the body and mind. Suppose your identification is shifted from body-mind to sat-chit-ananda atma, consciousness. Watch this. This body-mind is a little speck in the universe. Where is the universe? In consciousness. You follow that? This is a little speck in the universe, but the universe is just a little speck in your consciousness. Whoa, we've just flipped the scale completely. Yes, body is a little speck in the universe. Universe is a little speck in consciousness. Because in your consciousness is much more than the universe. So this is the consequence of shifting that identification from body-mind to sat-chit-ananda atma, and that's what Shankara describes in the second line. He uses some hyperbole here. He says, Yaha ananyadrik, one who sees oneself as being non-separate, one who sees the universe as being non-separate from oneself, one who sees the universe as being within oneself. So that person, Yaha Ananyadrik, the one who has that vision of Advaita, one who is swastham, abiding in one's true nature, not in body and mind, but one who is established in sat-chit-ananda atma, that person is swarat, is the ruler of himself, is the I don't know, there must be a better expression for that. It suggests utter independence, swarat. Nothing is above you. So notice, body-mind is a little speck, universe is above the little speck, but consciousness is above the universe. What's above that? Nothing. So that's the sense of swarat, the one who is established in his own glory. That's a very common translation for swastham swarat, one who's established in one's own glory. Tasya, for such a person, Shankara is kind of tongue-in-cheek here. Devaha asanvashe, even the gods fall under his control. He is intentionally tongue-in-cheek. You think that Shankara really didn't have a sense of humor? I think anyone who's really enlightened, you must have a great sense of humor because you don't take anything seriously. I think it contributes, I think, to a great sense of humor. So he's making a little joke here. He is comparing it to swarat. One who, in the prior line, in the first line, that kripanaha, those who are very tiny, miserable little critters, is compared to one who is swarat, no one above. And above means even the gods are below him. That's his idea. He says, devaha asanvashe, the gods fall under his command, because he's swarat. He's at the top of the pecking order, as they say in English. By the way, you know that's a reference to chickens, right? Pecking order? That's where it comes from. Chickens. Anyway, we're not talking about chickens. Sorry, I'm making bad jokes today. All right, let's continue. Hitva jatyadi sambandham, hitva jatyadi sambandham, vachonya sahakarma bihi, vachonya sahakarma bihi, omitva ityevam swamatmanam. Om ityevam swamatmanam. Sarvam shuddham prapadyata. Sarvam shuddham prapadyata. The verse concludes, the sentence concludes in the next verse. We'll see that in just a moment. So here he really describes the shift of identification here. Hitva, giving up. Jatyari sambandham, giving up your sambandha, your connection, your identification to jati hari. Jati, the traditional word for what we now call caste, but it's used to refer to all human attributes, starting with I'm a human being, I am male, female, I'm this, that, and the other thing, all of that. So giving up identification to the human condition, and not only that, but vachaha anyaha, giving up all anyaha. Vachaha. Vachaha here means not words so much as concepts, ideas. Giving up all ideas of anya, of otherness. We didn't make this point before, but you are that little critter in vast space. How many little critters are in that vast space? Infinite. How many vast spaces are there? So far as we know, one. Above that one vast space is consciousness. That consciousness is also one. Not that there are many consciousnesses out there. There is but one consciousness beyond that space. And that's a reference here. So this is Advaita. There is but one sat-chit-ananda Atma, as we've discussed so many times, one consciousness manifest in every sentient being. That's the idea. So therefore, all ideas of otherness are given up. Saha karma bihi, along with karma, along with the sense of being an agent of action. I did it. I am doing it. I am talking. So giving up all sense of agency. This is the shift of identification. The first part is giving up what you're not. That removal of dehatma buddhi. That's the negative part. What about the positive part? Notice it's not merely you are not a jiva. That's not enough. Who are you? So just to negate what you're not is only the first half of the method of Advaita Vedanta. The second part, of course, is the assertion of the truth of who you are. And how do you meditate on that truth? Shankara gives a suggestion. One way to meditate on the truth of yourself is Om iti. Meditate on Om. Om, as you know, is a name for Brahman. That's what it is. It's a sound symbol that represents Brahman. It's a name for Brahman. So when you're meditating Om, 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 the meaning of that is, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. So instead of I am this little critter sitting in a chair, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. So the critter sitting in the chair is negated. That's the first one. Hitva jatyadi sambandham. So that's the negation part. And then comes the assertion part. Om iti. I am that Brahman. Om iti evam swatmanam. You should meditate on swatmanam, your own true nature, as being Om. I am Om, I am Om. That swatmanam, that true self, which is sarvam, which is all, which is shuddham. We gave that space example before. Space is pure in the sense that it is untouched by whatever is in space. I'm just thinking right now, Delhi is going through another time of, and I have a lot of friends in Delhi, and they must be suffering terribly because of the smog there. The interesting if you go to Delhi, don't do this. Don't tell them, that's okay. Smog doesn't really affect space. The space in which you live here in Delhi is utterly unaffected by the smog, which is a statement of fact, but it's not very helpful. So that smog is a problem. So prapadyata, interesting choice of verbs, present tense. He's talking about meditation, and then he's giving this present tense verb, prapadyata, Om iti prapadyata. Second person. You are Om. No, that doesn't work. So, singular. Or plural, sorry. Ta, tam, taha. Singular. Second person, singular.
Sin would be singular.
In atma-vichara. Atma-vichara. It's passive. Anyway, you check that later. I looked at, my grammar is, I read Sanskrit fine nowadays, but I haven't taught grammar in such a long time. It's going away. Which means she has to continue teaching grammar. I'm not going to teach it anymore. I don't think I could teach very well anymore. Oh, here I should. Where are we? There she is, over on the far right side. This is for our online viewers. I want them to see Vasanti, who's on the far right of this view, and she is my assistant, and she is our Sanskrit teacher. Okay, nice. She hates being on camera, by the way. I'll hear about this later. No, it's not a problem. Okay. Present, he doesn't use an imperative verb, which is what I thought it would. You should meditate. He says, you are that Om. What is there to meditate on? In a manner of speaking, nididhyasana is simply being who you already are. And here's how it works. So, and the next verse will show this in some more detail. But Om, 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 this meditation. Remember, the meaning of Om is I am Brahman. Om, Om, Om. The purpose of that is just to shut up the mind. So eventually you get tired of chanting Om, and then what? Silence. In that silence, what's left? Sat-chit-ananda Atma, which is Brahman. This is how it works. So Om is, in one sense, as an object of meditation, it means I am Brahman, which is important for this nididhyasana. But at another point, from another perspective, it's a tool. The very word mantra means a tool for the mind, right? Man plus tre is trich pratyaya, the agent affix. So it's a tool for the mind, and in particular, it's a tool to silence the mind. So in silence, what is left is you. And then after this, and here's how the nididhyasana works. We talked about this a lot. I think it was in that chapter 10 we saw before. And that is, nididhyasana doesn't take place in silence. What takes place? I'll ask you a trick question. What takes place in silence? And the answer is nothing. Nothing takes place in silence, which means nididhyasana doesn't take place in silence. Nididhyasana takes place when the silence is over and you say, wow, I am that pure consciousness abiding in silence. That's nididhyasana, not the silence. The silence is meditation. Meditation is not contemplation. Dhyana is not nididhyasana. Nididhyasana doesn't happen during the silence. It happens after the silence. And I think the best way of describing that after the silence is wow. That's nididhyasana. Okay. And he continues that wow in the next verse. Setum sarva vyavasthanam, setum sarva vyavasthanam, ahoratrari varjitam, ahoratrari varjitam, tiryagurdhvamada sarvam, tiryagurdhvamada sarvam, sakrit, yes, sakrit jyotiranamayam, sakrit jyotiranamayam. Setum sarva vyavasthanam. Fix that, yeah. Sarva vyavasthanam, for everything that has been created. Setum, very poetic word, comes from the Vedas, and I've translated it literally to show how this is poetry. In poetry, you cannot take words on their face literal value. What in the world does it mean, bridge? That's the literal meaning of setu. So if you see, and I find it amusing to see how how translators struggle with this. By the way, notice I chose not to struggle with it. Because it's not translatable. I mean, if you it is translatable, it means bridge, but that's not its meaning. The one translation I consult from time to time translates it as protector. A bridge is a protector in the sense that it protects you from being washed away in the river. I don't think that's the right. In other contexts, it can mean protector like that. I think in this context, setum, bridge is that by which you cross over. And what are you crossing over? Sarva vyavasthanam. Vyavasthanam. The bridge for crossing over all that exists. So this requires a little understanding of the poetic usage of this word setu, and it's used differently in different places. So that in that silence, you discover the reality which is beyond all worldly existence. That's part of the wow. Wow is what I'm using to describe your reflection on your reflection on the experience of silence. So in this nididhyasana, there's a moment of silence in which only you exist in your true nature, followed by reflection. That reflection is nididhyasana. And I've been kind of facetiously saying it's the wow moment, but it's much more than wow. It's Shankara gives some very specific aspects of that wow moment, including appreciation of your nature being transcendent. That's what the word setu suggests, sir. That which crosses you, that which helps you cross over. Also, you appreciate that who you are is ahar ratrari varjitam. Ahar ratra becomes aho ratra. Ahar day, ratra of course night. Aho ratrari varjitam, free from day and night. And again, metaphor. This is poetry. What do you mean free from day and night? Day means when you're awake. Night means when you're not awake, sleeping, dreaming. So consciousness doesn't go through phases of jagrat, swapna, and sushupti, waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. Varjitam, free from the states of waking, dreaming, and sleep. It is expressed here as free from day and night, but again, this is poetry. And Shankara, as I said, he has a sense of humor. He also has a love of poetry. So we can understand that, not hard. Then he continues, Tiryag urdvam adaha sarvam. He used that word sarvam in a prior verse. Sarvam means all. All can mean so many things. By the way, all is a pronoun, is it not? So then pronouns represent something. So what does the pronoun all represent? Could represent many, all of the nasty people in this country. How's that all? Obviously that's not the sense here. So what does all, he gives a meaning for all. All means everything that is tiryak, across, everything that is urdhva, above, and everything that is adaha, below. It's a reference to that which is like space, that which is boundaryless, dimensionless, infinitely vast. And I think it was in last week I gave that example. In that actually I didn't use silence. I said when you lose identification with your body and mind in meditation, when you are deeply absorbed and you're not aware of the presence of your body and mind, you're not aware of sitting in a room, in that condition, you experience yourself located where? There's no where. Nowhere. That's exactly the sense. And that's what Shankara means to convey here. Also, sakrit jyotihi, that which is always shining. Consciousness doesn't blink on and off, always shining. And anamayam, free from amaya. Amaya means any kind of illness or disease, the problems of the body, the problems of the mind, utterly free from all of that. So he suggests that this contemplation be done using Om, 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 I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, leading to, it doesn't need to lead to silence, even if you are absorbed in Om. By the way, nididhyasana doesn't necessarily depend on a silent mind, and I think I've wrongly given that impression. There are many ways to do nididhyasana. Okay? So many ways. One of which is to be absorbed in the object of meditation. Here the object of meditation is Om. So when you are completely absorbed in Om, what else is left? Notice absorption means the division between meditator and object of meditation goes away. That's what absorption means. That's what samadhi means. At one point, you are meditating on Om. At another point, there's only Om. That's absorption. And if you say, well, that's kind of sophisticated, hey, what are we studying here? This is not an introductory text. So, this instead of moment of silence, you could be absorbed in Om. Of course, the very sound Om makes you feel a sense of limitlessness, boundarylessness. The very nature of that sound suggests that limitlessness. So you experience that limitlessness of Om when you're absorbed in Om, and then comes a reflection. Wow. No boundaries, no limits, no amaya, no suffering. Okay. If we have time, we'll see just one more. Dharma dharma vinirmuktam, dharma dharma vinirmuktam, bhuta bhavyat krita kritat, bhuta bhavyam kritat, swatmanam swamatmanam param vidyat, swamatmanam param vidyat, vimuktam sarva bandhanaihi, vimuktam sarva bandhanaihi. Start in the third line. Vidyat. One should know. I think in this context, though, because this theme of nididhyasana continues, literally one should know. In context, one should contemplate. I think that would be a correct interpretation here. Literally, vidyat, one should know. But here, one should contemplate. One should contemplate on what? Swam atmanam. You should contemplate on your own self as being param, as being Brahman, the supreme, the ultimate. And you should contemplate on your own nature, being Brahman, which is, now go up to the top line, dharma, adharma, vinirmuktam. Vinirmuktam, completely free from dharma and adharma, good and bad karma. And again, you have to go a little further into this. This is nididhyasana. So he's not teaching Vedanta here. So then don't think, oh, yeah, of course Atma is beyond dharma. That's teaching. He's not teaching here. This is meant for the sake of nididhyasana. So what does he want you to contemplate on? You only accumulate good and bad karma when you do something. Atma doesn't do anything. You are akarta. Karta, agent of action. Akarta, not an agent of action. That is the contemplation here that Shankara is suggesting. I am not an agent of action. Body, mind, senses are all engaged in activities. Consciousness is not. Consciousness blesses, so to speak, blesses those activities, meaning allows those activities to take place, enables those activities to take place without being involved, without being engaged. So this is to be contemplated upon. I am not an agent of action. I am unchanging consciousness. In fact, that's the next one. If we've used that expression, unchanging consciousness, so many times, what can unchanging consciousness do? Which is why I've joked with you many times. My guru said consciousness is good for nothing. Can't do anything. And that unchanging consciousness is further described in the next line, bhuta bhavyat. You have to bring that word vinirkritam, vinirmuktam down. So free from bhuta and bhavya, past and future. That which is unchanging has a past, has a future. Doesn't make any sense for an unchanging reality. An unchanging reality doesn't exist in time. And this is a very lofty principle. It might take you a while to get your, might take you some time to get your to get your head around the timelessness of Atma. It's a very, very lofty teaching. Consciousness doesn't exist in time. Time exists in consciousness. You are aware of change, conscious of change. You are conscious of time. Time is in consciousness. Consciousness is not in time. That is to be contemplated upon. Of course, that's really easy to contemplate on unchanging consciousness, because especially in silence. So when you have that silence, what happens to time in silence? Here's an interesting observation. How do we experience time? And you remember we've talked about that before. We experience time because things change. If nothing changed, you wouldn't experience time. And the thing that changes the most, of course, is what's happening in our head, our thoughts and emotions and perceptions constantly buzzing around, constantly changing. In silence, of course, nothing changes. No change, no time. Timelessness of Atma. Also, Atma is free from, Atma meaning you. You're supposed to contemplate on Swatmanam, your true nature, as being Krita Akritat, as being beyond Krita and Akrita. Again, very poetic. Krita literally means that which is done. Akrita means literally that which is not done. But that's not the translation here at all. It's not Atma is done or not done. Is it like some food you put in the oven and is it done yet? So here, Krita, that which is an effect, and Akrita, that which is not an effect, is the cause. This is language. This is why to study this without knowing what you're doing or without a good commentary is going to be fruitless. You can't just take words. Just merely knowing Sanskrit is not enough. And I guess is my point. So beyond cause and effect, well, that's also very sophisticated. Beyond time we just discussed, now beyond cause and effect. Before the Big Bang went bang, no time, no cause and effect. The laws of nature came into existence only after the Big Bang went bang. So and the reason I'm sharing this with you is to help you conceptualize that which logically precedes the laws of nature, like cause and effect. Notice I said logically precede. You can't say precede in terms of time. Logically precedes. So before the Big Bang, logically before the Big Bang, not time-wise, before the Big Bang. Logically before the Big Bang, there was no time, no cause and effect. That the consciousness, which is your nature, logically preceded the Big Bang. Okay. And therefore, you meditate on yourself as being vimuktam, utterly free, sarva bandhanai, of all bondage. When you're absorbed in Om, or you're absorbed in silence, nothing is present to cause any sense of bondage. Excuse me. And that's a really good place to conclude our class today. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.